introvert. How about you? Introvert or extrovert? You know, a lot of people are confused about what all that really means. Both extroverts and introverts are called to love people, to have a welcoming spirit about them, to serve people. But they may look different in their relationships. As an introvert, if I've been with people all week at the seminary and then I'm teaching a weekend retreat, by the time Sunday comes, I'm absolutely drained and exhausted, and I've got to have some time to myself to refuel, just to be alone and get ready to go back out there. Now, my friend Joy, my colleague at Dallas Seminary, she's an extrovert, and boy is she. She loves to be with people. She's with people all week long, and then her home is a hub of people coming and going all weekend. Well, our relational lives are going to look a little bit different. And the point is that that's okay. Do you know how God has wired you? That's the main thing to think about. And so that you will understand and discover a healthy life rhythm for your relationships. We have been looking at 4 models of those who love and serve others well. We looked at Jesus last time as in the kenosis, the emptying, what he gave up and how he served us and how he loved us. Now this week, we're going to be looking at Paul, who says that he is pouring himself out like a drink offering. By that he means that he is sacrificing, he is loving others well, he's serving them. But he also is going to talk about other people in his life and his relational connections. He's going to tell us a little bit about Epaphroditus and a little bit about Timothy. Now, I used to I would skim over these kinds of passages thinking, well, they don't really have much to do with me. It's a bunch of relationships that I don't have in my life. But I've come to see that we can learn a lot by looking at how especially the first century church, how the people in that church related to each other. So we're going to take a look at some of those dynamics to see if they can help us relate to those in our world. In chapter 2, verse 29, Paul begins by describing his friend. He says he wants to send Timothy to be with the Philippians so they can learn more about him and enjoy his friendship and fellowship with him. And he remarks how he is so delighted to get news from them. We see as we look at all these relationships that Paul has more than a Facebook kind of relationship with his friends. He goes deeper. Now, you can't go deep with everyone, but I hope that, like Paul, you have a few people that you know really well, and you've allowed them to know you very well as well. Now, Paul in chapter 2, verse 20, tells us that Timothy is someone who takes a genuine interest in Paul's welfare and in the Philippians' welfare. Paul says that he thinks of him as a son. Now that's a beautiful concept, this intergenerational dynamic. And I think it says to us, do we have people in our lives, younger people who have older people in their lives, and vice versa, so that we have spiritual children or spiritual parents, so to speak. Paul wants to send Timothy to Philippi because he knows how much the Philippians would gain by knowing him well. And it shows us that Paul's not stingy or possessive with those that he loves. He wants his dear friends to love one another the way he loves them both. And that's a beautiful example for us to emulate. In verses 25 through 30, we see more about the relationship between Epaphroditus, Paul, and the Philippians. And it is a beautiful picture. What's going on? Well, the Philippians hear that Paul has been arrested and imprisoned in Rome, and they are concerned. The prisons in the Roman era were not like ours today. They didn't feed you and clothe you and take care of you. Someone else had to do that, or you would go without. The Philippians knew this, and so they decided to send one of their very best, Epaphroditus, to go to Rome, a long trip, and take care and make sure the needs of Paul were met. Now, either on the way or while he was there, Epaphroditus became extremely ill, almost to the point of death. And the Philippians hear about this, and they're extremely concerned now about Epaphroditus. And Paul is so concerned about the Philippians' concern that he says he's going to send Epaphroditus back so they won't be so worried about him. I'm sure that maybe someone from the church in Rome will then take care of Paul's needs. It's a beautiful picture. We see this dynamic of caring and concern. And it's a microcosm of what was going on in the first century. It's one of the reasons why Christianity was spreading like wildfire. They took such good care of their own, and even those outside of their own community. Let me give you an example. In that time in the first century, in a Roman family, when a baby was born, the family had the option, the first week of its life, to decide whether they would keep that child, whether the father would bless that child or not. And if that child was not taken into the family, then they would take the child and they would just leave it somewhere, out on a dump, out by a river, and they called it exposure, and the child would just be exposed to the elements and die. But the Christians felt that this was cruel, and they were known for going to these places and finding these children and bringing them into their homes and raising them. This kind of benevolence was so beautiful that even the Roman world took note. And this is one of the reasons why in a few hundred years Christianity was able to topple the Roman Empire, not by the sword, but by love. God wants these beautiful kinds of relationships to be part of my life and your life. And yet we know that today, research tells us that people are lonelier than ever before. I don't know if it's technology, if it's our busyness, but we see this, and you may feel that way as well. Well, if that's the case, I have some suggestions for you. I want to challenge you that if you're not plugged into a local faith community, ask the Lord to find you that group of people. Pray for guidance that He will lead you to a spiritual community that fits you. Be sure that it's a community that teaches the Bible as truth. Be sure that they teach salvation by grace alone, and that they're built on sound doctrine. It won't be a perfect community. It can't be a perfect church because it's full of people. And as we've talked about before, we all mess up. But it will be a place where ultimately, as you invest, you will find joy. Now, if you're already plugged into a community of faith, but you just don't feel connected, I want to challenge you to pray and ask the Lord for guidance to help you find a small group of people that you can invest in. And don't think about what it is they can give you or ways they can serve you, but think about how you can give and serve them. There are a number of ways this can look. My husband does quite a bit of prison ministry, and he's found his community, men who speak into his life, in that prison ministry. So it may be that you find people, your group, in the place where you serve. I find my closest relationships in my Bible study. I've been in a small group in women's Bible study for over 40 years, and I love it. And even though I'm on the teaching team for the women's Bible study, I'm just a participant in the group. but I love those women, and they know me and I know them, and we're there to help and serve one another. Now, as a couple, we also have found a community. We call it a home group, and we see those same couples each week in church in our what we call an adult Bible community, and then we meet with them in a home a couple of times a month. In our instant, quick fix microwave world, we're almost immunized against connecting with others. And it can rob us of one of the sweetest gifts, authentic relationships, and a source of joy. But that gift can be yours, it can be mine, but we've got to be intentional about investing. So get connected. It was a way of life in the first century, and God wants us to make it our way of life today as well.